Hey everybody, it's Dennis O'Brien here with Susan Johnson and Matt Rupar on Let's Talk About It. And we are really pleased tonight to host the mayor of Hartford, Connecticut, Luke Bronin. Luke was just here a few days ago marching in the Boombox Parade, and he helped Wayne Norman put his hat back on when Wayne's hat fell to the ground. So Wayne wanted me to mention that on the air, Luke, and he says thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you, Dennis and Susan, for having me on. And, you know, it was an American flag hat, so when it falls to the ground, you got to show it respect and pick it up real quick and get it back where it belongs.
Well, we appreciate that you came out to the Boombox Parade, and we're certainly very happy to have you here on this show, Luke, Mayor Bronin. And we're just very, very excited to have you talk a little bit about some of the things that you did before you became the mayor and what led to you becoming the mayor.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and I've been looking forward to it. And I had a blast at the parade. It was for that brief moment when it wasn't a torrential downpour that day. It was a beautiful thing.
Well, as we always say, Wayno keeps control of the weather, and he did it again.
Yeah, we were very lucky. We caught it just right, and it was a great parade. A lot of great people in the parade, a lot of great people in the audience, and it's always a big hit. And Luke, it was great for you to come out from Hartford to march in the parade. And you're no stranger to these parts. We've had you out here many times. Any event, I just want you to give a little brief. I could do it, but I'd rather have you do it because you're more familiar with it. But how about a brief biographical sketch of Luke Bronin?
Sure. Well, I'll go backwards, I guess. So I've been mayor. It'll be 8 years in December, which that's what the calendar says, although it feels like 20. Before that, I was working as then Governor Malloy's chief legal counsel, so his general counsel. I did that for a couple of years. And before that, I spent 4 years down in the federal government at the Treasury Department during the first Obama term, President Obama's first term from 2009 to 13. And I was working in the wake of the financial crisis, worked on the Wall Street Reform Act, the Dodd-Frank Act, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Then I had a deployment in the middle of that because I was a Navy reservist, and I spent some time over in Afghanistan and then came back to a different part of the Treasury where I ran an office that was responsible for counter-terrorist financing and anti-money laundering, sort of all the international illicit finance stuff in our sanctions programs. And that was fascinating work. I loved it. It was a great team and time to be doing it. But it was really hard on the home front. We had 2 little kids that I was traveling all the time. So that's when we decided to come back up to Connecticut, and I started working for Malloy. And in the 2 years at the governor's office, Susan, we got to work together on a bunch of stuff.
That's right.
We did a lot of good work on common sense gun laws, on environmental protection, open space protection, on combating veterans homelessness, which was something that I felt really strongly about, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I felt really lucky to have done all of that, federal and state. But there's something just unique and special from my standpoint about working at the local level, the municipal level. You're face to face with your work. You confront your failures and your successes every day in a way that kind of pushes you to do your best, and I've loved that.
Well,
that's a quick sketch.
You've done amazing work wherever you are, whether it's with the governor, that I was familiar with your work there, and I didn't realize your background about working with the federal government and that you were in the Navy as well. So that's all amazing work, and of course, understanding all those financial aspects has been I'm sure, very, very helpful to you in analyzing where we are now in the state of Connecticut.
Yeah, we also know, Luke, that you're a musician, a singer, and a composer. And if we had you, and next time you come out here, we're going to have you bring your guitar and sing us a song.
Oh, you're going to have to give me some time to remember how to do it in that case.
Come on, we wouldn't spring it on you. We've got to rehearse.
That was another that was another lifetime. I did used to play a lot, and I miss it, and I should be doing more of it. Who knows? Maybe come January, I'll get back in the habit the way I should.
Okay, so Hartford is a city that's near and dear to me personally. I grew up in the shadow of Hartford in the northern part of New Britain, and I spent an awful lot of time in Hartford as a kid playing basketball, especially at Southwest Boys Club in tournaments and also at Keeney Park. And I also worked in the Hartford Post Office during the years I was at the UConn Law School back in the early 70s. Anyway, I love Hartford. I remember reading that Mark Twain moved to Hartford because he thought it was the most beautiful city in America. And it is beautiful. It's a beautiful place, but it certainly has, has its difficulties that it didn't have, kind of when I was a young kid. But so when you started there in almost 8 years ago, so what were your expectations?
Well, look, I ran for mayor because there were things that I felt like we had to try to tackle more seriously, and was frustrated by some of the decisions that were being made. But I have to admit, I knew that we had our challenges ahead. I didn't really have a full appreciation for the scale of the financial problem that I was going to come into when I took office. And that was the first thing was to recognize, to get under the hood and just realize how broken the financial situation was, and it had been getting worse for a while. And when I came in, what we were looking at was a real cliff, just a sea of red ink. The city was bankrupt. It was not in bankruptcy legally, but it was bankrupt. And it was so bad that there were, looking out over the years ahead, you could see the date when the city wouldn't have been able to make its payroll, and you could see those cliffs when you could have eliminated entire huge important departments of the city and still not been able to close that gap. And the one thing that I was determined to do, and my team along with me were determined to do, was not to just buy time. We didn't want to just find a way to Band-Aid it over or to buy another year, get from 2016 to 2017 and then figure it out then. We really wanted to try to lay a stronger foundation. And that meant a whole bunch of things. I mean, first of all, it meant some really tough decisions. We made some really deep cuts that were painful for our community, and had a real impact on services in the city. We asked our unions to come to the table in some really, really big ways, and they did.
Well, that's amazing work that you did, that you were able to actually, get that sort of, agreement with everybody, because I think everybody realized the difficulty. When you take a look at the mill rate, it's the highest mill rate, I think, in the state. Back when you took over, it was around 74, I think.
That's right.
And
That's right.
everything had been split, too, where the businesses, I think, paid more than the residents, and in terms of the property tax.
Yeah.
So you
which
had
is still
these,
the case.
Yeah. but that doesn't do a lot to attract business, and yet
Right.
you've been able to attract business. And some of the things I think you might have realized, I'm pretty sure you realized actually, when you were working for the state, was how the state works with the municipalities, particularly the municipalities that serve.
Yeah.
And as I call us serving communities. So maybe tell me a little bit about how you view that.
Sure. And let me. I apologize. I had something happen to my phone there, so I was just a couple other pieces of it that I'll include what you're talking about, Susan. Beyond making those tough cuts and extra unions, we also asked our companies, our big corporations, to be part of the solution in a meaningful way and to put some real money on the table, which they did. And then, as you know, we built in partnership with our legislative leaders, with the governor's office, with our legislature as a whole, a partnership that made it possible to put together a long-term fiscal sustainability plan, a long-term plan that would actually give us the chance to budget responsibly, to provide the basic services we need, and then to grow. And a part of making that case for why that made sense, not just for the city of Hartford, but for the state, gets to this point that you're talking about, Susan, I think, which is that, in Connecticut, as a whole, we're a hugely fragmented state. We're 169 towns.
Exactly.
A lot of the needs in our state are concentrated in particular places. And those places with the highest need often have the smallest resource base to draw on. They're often among the poorest communities, which means they don't have that property wealth to draw on to support those needs. And at the same time, they provide enormously important services for the state as a whole or for the region as a whole, right? Whether it's hospitals or educational institutions or social service providers or state government property institutions, all of that stuff that serves as a resource for a whole region, but doesn't contribute to the economic base and the tax base. And I think that's one of the things we just had to have a more honest conversation about in the state. Something that affects Willimantic a lot.
Yes.
Something that affects Hartford and many other cities. But I think I love this conversation, that you and I often have, because I think sometimes people perceive it as a problem that's only for the biggest cities in Connecticut, and that's not the case. There's just some really profound differences and disparities among communities, and we've got a property tax system that sometimes makes that worse, not better.
Exactly, and I'm so thrilled to have you talk about that, because I know that you've worked hard, and I just want to have Dennis talk a little bit about what he did, because Senator Looney was finally able to create the 3-tiered payment in lieu of taxes system, and Dennis had worked with you and with a number of the Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, Waterbury, some of the bigger places, because they host the state, they host the nonprofits, they host the hospitals that provide these services, and to not be able to get the regular payment in lieu of taxes that we are supposed to have, and be treated the same as a town that has maybe one small pilot situation, really is something that has been detrimental to us since we put in pilots. So Dennis, tell us a little bit about your work.
Well, I don't want to go too far into it, Luke, but you probably don't know how it started with us from Wyndham. Is I was on the town council with people like Charlie Critch, who works for the CCHRO, attorney, and Dawn Niles, and we had the executive director of CCM, Joe, come out and talk to us, because we told him we were not happy with the way CCM was treating the inner cities. We certainly consider ourselves an inner city, just like Hartford does. We're not like you in a lot of ways, but we have very similar issues, as you know.
Yeah.
And that's true of New London also, which is another. You mentioned smaller towns, and even Jewett City, I think, Norwich.
Absolutely.
They're not in our class. I mean, New London and Wyndham are in a class by itself when it comes to those kinds of problems out this way. But anyway, Joe came to us and said, "What do you want?" Because we dropped out of CCM. We didn't think we were getting enough attention, and what I've always wanted, and I tried to get it through when Ed Marcus was the chairman of the state chairman of the Democratic Party, would be a group of people from inner cities all over the state, big ones, small ones, people who had inner city problems, meeting on a regular basis and addressing problems that we have in common. And Joe said, "Okay, if that's what you want, that's what we'll have." And we got back. We were the only town that was not in CCM. We had dropped out, and that's how those meetings got started. And I really missed that, because I'm not on the town council anymore, and I was designated by the then mayor to represent us, probably because I said the most about it during our meetings, a lot more than anybody else actually. And I really enjoyed working with you and with Mayor Elicker and all the other mayors, and even Matt Hart, who came, and he was from West Hartford at the time. Matt and I worked together for 14 years in Mansfield, and he's now with CROG, of course, and he was there, and we had a great group, and out of our first few meetings came the proposal that Marty Looney put forward to increase pilot fund. It had the effect of increasing pilot funding to cities like New Haven and Hartford, and Bridgeport and Waterbury, and New Britain, and smaller cities like our own.
I am so grateful for the work that you did to help build that coalition, because it was really important. And as you know, people had been trying and arguing and trying to make the case for changing that pilot formula and more fully funding it for a long time without a lot of progress. And I think it was that coalition that finally moved the needle with Senator Looney's leadership, but with that coalition helping to make the case. And that was really important. And I think that one of the important parts of it was changing that perception of it, that it wasn't just about the Bridgeports and the Hartfords and the New Havens. That it was, as you said, it was also about the New Londons and the Wyndhams and the East Hartfords and the New Britons and many others. There are a lot of communities that face that. So and as you know, I no longer there, but for 2 years until this past January, I was the president of CCM, and one of the things that I take a lot of pride in, but I think is actually rooted in that same work that you talked about, was helping to make sure that CCM wasn't just a body that was saying no to things. It was actually trying to be part of pushing forward some solutions that really needed to be tackled in a serious way.
Well, the cities that we talked about, the big ones and the small ones, we may have a large percentage of the population of the state put together, but in terms of numbers, with all the other towns under all 169, we're a minority, and we need special attention from our major advocacy group, CCM, and I think that that started to happen, and that was a great way to get us off the ground doing that pilot project. And of course, as you implied, at least, it wouldn't have happened without Senator Looney, no question.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
It was a stroke of genius to create that 3-tiered system. I thought, wow,
right.
Here we are, and they going according to the incomes of the population and the resources, and how much they support the region and the state with respect to non-taxable pilot programs, and so that was a great way to frame everything. And I was just thrilled when I saw that come out. I go, yes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I thought it was a really well designed, really important, and long overdue. And of course, it doesn't mean the battle's done either.
No.
It's, you still got a long way to go before there's full recognition of the role that communities like the ones we're talking about play. And I think that sometimes in that conversation, it's also really important not just to talk about the burden that those communities carry or the challenges that they have, but and not even just from a fairness standpoint, which is, I think, a powerful argument, but even beyond that, just to have a healthy, strong, vibrant state that's growing, you got to have regional centers that are healthy and strong and vibrant. You need a healthy, exciting, energetic New London to help all of southeastern Connecticut grow. You need a healthy, strong, vibrant, culturally rich Wyndham and Wilmanic for the sort of central northeast part of the state. You need a strong capital city, and you can go on and on. But we often let ourselves, I think, get so sort of fragmented in this state that we forget that you really do need those strong centers to be centers of gravity that help drive economic growth and be the place where you can create housing opportunity and attract and retain young people. So I think it's also really important to make not just the case about fairness, but the case about why it matters for the whole state that these communities get put into a position where it's possible for them to be strong and successful.
Well, that's related in large part to our schools, because there's more failure in schools in towns that are impacted like ours are. There's no question. And when people fail in school, they're unable to make a contribution to the state's economy. They're unable to realize their potential to do that. And when they fail in large numbers, it really brings the state down. It's not good for them, of course, either, but it's not good for the people living in Avon, Simsbury, and Rowayton. I mean, it is really important that we're all in this together, and I think it's important for us living in the cities and being very familiar with the cities to make the point to the legislators from who are not representing those cities that we're all in it together, and how well we do is going to have a relationship to how well you do.
Well, I want to add something to that, because a lot of the legislators that are not in the urban settings that we just mentioned somehow believe that we get more money, when in fact on a per pupil basis we've been getting less since Lowell Weicker was the governor. And by the way, he was a wonderful governor and a great U.S. senator, but because of the the failure of the legislature to make adjustments after he was governor, we put ourselves in a situation where the education cost sharing grant wasn't updated until 2017 after he left the governorship in 1994, 92. Anyway, so we finally now this time we have finally actually made sure that every single community is equalized with respect to the education cost sharing grant. Of course, we need more than that. We need to also, and we're going to go for a message break to let our sponsors help us out with the show. But we need to talk a little bit more about some of the other things that can be done to help Connecticut really grow the economy. We'll be right back after these messages. This is Susan Johnson with Dennis O'Brien and our wonderful guest this afternoon, Mayor Luke Bronin. So.
Okay, we're off the air for just a couple of minutes. If there's anything in particular that you want to talk about, and I know there's so much you could tell us, like we often have Joe Courtney on the show, and sometimes we'll open up asking him one question, and he'll talk for the rest of the show. And you could do that too. I know you could.
Well, I'm happy. If you want to do sort of an open-ended, what's happening in Hartford, or like what are you trying to get done in the next 6 months, or in the last 6 months, happy to talk about that kind of stuff.
That's great.
What I'm really interested in, I've been fighting this battle for a long time, and ever since I was a legal aid lawyer, starting in the early 70s, and I was hired. Doug Crockett and I were hired by the city of Norwalk to do a study on segregated schools, on economically and racially, and we did. And wow, what a problem! And in Connecticut, and you talk about 169 towns. I mean, when we went through the process of cutting down the number of probate courts, which definitely had to be done, there were some probate courts that were working out of a closet one day a week, or half a day a week. And when we cut down on that, we got a lot of coverage in the Current. And we had the guy who was covering us, I can't remember his name now, he's still around, come out here, and I told him, I said, look, we should do the same thing with the rest of the state. We're going down to 40 probate courts. We should have 30 to 40 towns and 30 to 40 school districts. I'd say I'd start with the school districts first.
Yep.
But that's...
Yeah.
That's a big goal.
Well, I did that whole when I came in. I did that whole tour of all the towns around here, trying to make that case for regionalism.
Oh, sure, that's a big goal.
It is. I think that one of the ways to, finally get the adjustment of regionalism is to make sure that everybody's financed more equitably. And I think that is one of the things because one of the things, I was on the housing committee last cycle, not this one, and one of the things that we hear from the Republicans all the time is what you want us to build more, state housing, state authority public housing. You don't even get pilot for that. Why would we want to do that? So if we don't actually treat the municipalities like that, like they should be treated, then the suburban towns are going to have the excuse, well, you don't get the money, the urban areas don't get the money, so why would we want to expand into the suburban areas? Because you won't get any money there either. So, once we start paying for things, I think that maybe they'll step up a little more.
Well, you used the right word, many right words in our first talk before the commercial break. Luke, it's fragmentation. Fragmentation is a big part of the problem, and I think it's a big problem on the national level as well. I mean, we're just not together, and fragmentation is the enemy.
And in Connecticut, I think there are probably very few people who would say that if you were building a state from scratch,
yes,
you would take this state of 3.5 million people,
right,
and then break it up into 169 little towns, and duplicate every single service in every single one, and concentrate poverty in certain places. You wouldn't build it that way if you were building it from scratch. But obviously, we don't get to build it from scratch. We've got to deal with what we've got and then try to make it better.
Well,
but I do think that's an important part of the conversation, is just recognizing that basic fact that we do have there are not a lot of places in the country that do it the way we do it.
That's right.
That don't have some kind of county government, that don't have larger geographic municipalities, that don't have the ability to, whether it's annexation or expansion authorities. There's just very, very few other places in the country that do it the way we do it. And we at least have to be willing to look ourselves in the mirror and acknowledge, our differences, and then see, all right, despite that history or with that history, how do we try to put this state in a position to be as strong and successful as possible?
You have 20 seconds.
Yeah, just one more thing. What a difference it would make if Hartford included West Hartford, East Hartford, New Britain,
Sure.
Farmington, et cetera, and you had a city of over 1 million people. I mean, what a difference that would make economically, and in a lot of ways, educationally as well.
Yep.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Susan Johnson. I'm here with my co-host, Dennis O'Brien, and our very special guest this evening, Mayor Luke Bronin, the mayor of Hartford, Connecticut. And we're just having such a great chat about all the things that Luke Bronin has done as mayor, and all the things perhaps that we're going to be looking at in his last 6 months in service as mayor of Hartford. So why don't we talk a little bit about that vision that you have?
Sure. I always love talking about Hartford. We've got a lot of work underway, and people keep asking me, you just feel like you're slowing down with 6 months left, and I feel like right now we're moving faster than pretty much any other time in the last 8 years, because there's so much stuff that we want to try to get done before the clock runs out. And that includes a lot of economic development work. We've worked really hard to try to get investment coming back into the city to go after neighborhood economic development projects that the city and community has wanted for a long, long time, but just hadn't been able to get done and get some of those done. And then we really have to reposition and reimagine what our downtown looks like, because for many, many years, Hartford's downtown was kind of like a downtown office park, and it was, quiet after 5 and on weekends. And so even before the pandemic, we were working really hard to make it a neighborhood and build lots of residential units that would change the way it feels. And we made some good progress there, but of course the pandemic was a huge gut punch and just sucked so much energy and so many people out, because people weren't in those office buildings anymore. And so that means we've had to accelerate that work even more and really try to push forward on that residential development. So there's about a dozen projects that we're working really hard on that I may not get to do the ribbon cuttings on, but some of them I might get to do the groundbreakings on, and some of them may just get far enough down the field that that they got a shot to score, and that's the real focus right now. And then of course there's so much other work that isn't what you see as you drive through the city, but I think is equally important. Things like trying to continue to strengthen our youth service corps that we built, which has helped to give thousands of kids their first paid job and connection to mentorship and skill building and support, and things like our reentry welcome center to try to make sure that people who are coming back into our community actually get the chance to build a life that is better for themselves, but also for the whole city, and makes for a safer, stronger city. So, there's just so much work underway that we're trying to keep pushing on. And some of it is trying to go after goals that we want, and some of it is just battling back against challenges. We talked a little bit about education. We talked, but we haven't talked much about the pandemic, but like a lot of places, we really saw kids disengage after that pandemic, and we're working hard to try to get them re-engaged and in school and in activities in general. So there's a lot of work to do, and we're going to run through the finish line.
Yes. So I think that some of the things we did this last legislative session will help. Certainly the increase in the education cost-sharing grant should help bring in more funds to make the classroom sizes smaller and create more opportunity for the students in all of our areas that have been so underfunded for so long. And so I'm just wondering, I know that you're the town and the school is separate, but I just was wondering, what do you think the impact of that will be?
Well, I think that legislation this year was incredibly important. You talked about the fact that a lot of communities had not seen that ECS equalization for a long time, but but beyond that, you just hadn't seen that formula anywhere near fully funded. And there was a really strong group of legislators that you were a part of that worked hard to push that this year, and didn't get everything that we all wanted, but got a lot and made some really important progress. And look, I think to some extent that will allow us to make investments that have needed to be made. I hope in things that things like smaller class sizes in some places, maybe additional counselors and other types of support that are more and more necessary. And then, I think it's important to say, though, that it also for some districts just helps them keep pace because costs are going up.
Right.
And
that's right.
And teachers deserve raises, but that imposes enormous costs on districts, and you want to make sure that we're paying teachers what they deserve. So I think, a bill like that, which is so hard fought for and so hard won and so important, I hope it'll allow us to do more than we've done before, but it also means that for some communities, they're at least going to be able to keep doing what they were doing when there was a real risk that they wouldn't. That's
right. Yeah, that's an excellent point. And it's going back to the town, though, and the city, rather. The things that you're doing, like the youth services. How? Tell us a little bit about that program. That sounded very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's closest to my heart. We've done a lot of we try to get the baseball stadium back on the rails and get the budget back on track and all that. But if you ask me the thing that's probably closest to my heart over the last 8 years, it's the Youth Service Corps, and that's something that we built from scratch. We didn't have any public money to use for it at the time, so we raised private dollars, and the vision was to build a way to help reach the young people between the ages of 16 and 24 who were most off track, the kids who were most disengaged and disconnected. Those young people who had dropped out of school or had finished high school or maybe gotten a GED but were not pursuing more education, didn't have a job, and beyond that, we wanted to reach those kids who we knew had faced enormous obstacles. So it's not first come, first serve. It's by referral only. And a huge number of the kids in the Youth Service Corps are kids who have faced challenges that most kids can't really imagine, right? They've been under DCF supervision or in the foster system. They've been homeless or housing insecure. They've been justice involved. And we wanted to make sure that it was a chance for those kids to be part of a team, part of a group that was doing meaningful work in their community, was getting paid for that work year-round, minimum wage, but real paycheck year-round, and getting connected to mentors and coaches and support that would help them build the skills that would allow them to be successful in the next step. And then to make that plan for what the next step would be, whether it was going back to school, going on with school, or going on to get another job. And since we started it, we've had about 2,000 young people in Hartford who have been part of the Youth Service Corps. And if you think about that, we're a small city by national standards, right? We're 125,000 people. So we're talking about, 1.5% of our city has been a part of that Youth Service Corps and has gotten the chance to earn that paycheck, get that sense of pride, be part of that team, get connected to support and resources. And we want to see that grow even further. So that's something that I really think I'd love to see that model grow and be replicated around the state. Last year we were able to get some funding into the state budget, not just for Hartford, but to try to help fund some pilot programs like it around the state, and actually Stamford started one using some of that pilot funding. But that's something I think is really important because the kids in this Youth Service Corps, they're just as talented and smart and capable as kids anywhere, and they've been through a lot. And I don't think there's anything to me, that makes me prouder than seeing a young person who's gone into that youth service corps and then gone on, whether for more education or got that job and is doing well. And, I just love to see us do more of that.
I love that, and I just wanted to add one little thing, and to that whole, especially the children who are in the foster care, because they can go on to college from foster care, and if they have the right a chance with these support and having a group to be with that maybe shares a lot of the similar problems. This is a way to get them moving through and getting them onto some sort of educational opportunity. And now, of course, we have the free community college as well. So those combinations of things will really help. So this is a great step that you've created for people in those very difficult circumstances. So that is great work.
Yeah, I agree completely, Luke. I working with kids is so important. Kids that maybe have had a lot of difficulties, but have surmounted most of them, but are still, they don't have that kind of self-confidence they need to really develop their incredible skills. Because you're right, these kids are just as smart and just as capable as kids anywhere. They just have had it. They haven't had the fortune, the good fortune to have an easier milieu to operate in. And it's one of the reasons why I've spent years and years and years and years working with kids in Little League, especially with girls, trying to get girls to play ball, softball, building self-confidence. It's incredible how some of these kids grow. Some of them are not the greatest athletes, but they learn to play a team sport. They learn how, like in baseball or softball, how it's okay to fail. Don't let your failures take you out of the game. Just get that bat, get right up there and get a hit the next time. And that is such a great lesson. And in the kind of program you're talking about is, wow, that brought a smile to my face. That is so important because, as you know, it's trite to say it, but the kids are our future, and we've really got to work with the kids, and sometimes you have to do it in a milieu that's away from school. Doesn't it? You can learn a lot outside of school too, and you learn everywhere. You learn from your friends, you learn from your parents. You learn on the street, but it's the being involved in a structured program like that is going to turn the lives of lots of these kids around, and they're going to become very productive citizens, and they're going to have much greater and happier lives. That's wonderful.
Well, we sure hope it does, and I couldn't agree with you more about the lessons that you can learn, and I also love, for a lot of these young people who are in a youth service corps, the ability to bring home that paycheck, $15 an hour, and bring it home and be a contributor, even to their family in a meaningful way. That in itself is a game changer. And hopefully it means when they go apply for that next job, they can show that work experience also, which helps them get it. So we believe in it.
That's great. And so when you're talking about jobs, the economic expansion that you're doing in Hartford, bringing more businesses to Hartford, these kinds of things are very, very instrumental in terms of making the population have hope and access to different types of jobs and making them seek different types of educational opportunities. What kinds of things can you tell us about those business opportunities that have been developing?
Well, look, I think, first of all, we've got to acknowledge that the pandemic slowed that down too, right?
Yes.
I mean, we really had begun to make some really good progress in getting employers to move into the city, not out. And even during the pandemic, we saw some of that, but it definitely slowed us down. And the way that a lot of employers, are thinking about remote work versus in person, that's been a hard hit for us. But at the same time, not just in Hartford, but around the state, we're at a period where there are a lot of jobs open and available. And the real challenge is to make sure that we're preparing people for those jobs. And then beyond preparing people for those jobs, making sure that people can get to those jobs. I think that's one of the other obstacles. We've got a state that, as small as we are, we're not all that connected. And
That's right.
It can be really hard to get from one place to the other, especially if you don't have a car. There's a lot of folks in my city who don't have a car. So I think those are the kind of things that have to be part of the conversation, and we have to really unapologetically talk about those things as part of economic growth. Right? When we talk about transit opportunities, not charity, that's growth.
That's
when
right.
we talk about, your point about community college, which is one of the most important pipelines to employment in our state, that's not, just doing a favor for somebody and giving free tuition. That's economic growth.
That's
right.
That's
filling those jobs. And I really think it's important that we're just like really clear and loud about making that case for all those things that enable economic growth in this state.
That's absolutely right, and making sure people have access to those resources, because Electric Boat, Pratt and Whitney, Sikorsky Aircraft all require people that have some type of post-secondary education in engineering or some computer, IT, something, and they're not going to get that unless we support our students and help them get that post-secondary education. You got to have it.
And by the way. Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, it's also why we have to be talking about housing as part of economic growth, because you cannot grow if there's no place for people to live.
Right.
And I think this is one of the biggest things we've got to do as a state is figure out a way to balance this state's steady habits and this state's resistance to change with the need to create more opportunity for people to live. You've got thousands of jobs open at Electric Boat, and it's, New London is seeing tremendous residential development, and that's great to see, but we need to see that across the region there, and really across the state. If you look at the way the country has grown, and then you look at the way Connecticut has grown, we've pretty much flatlined. And if we're going to fill those jobs, we got to make sure that there are places for people to live.
Exactly.
And that includes, giving places where seniors can downsize or maybe move it into senior housing. And then, that if they don't want to stay in their home, they want to be in a different place, but that frees up their home to be a starter home for a new young family. And so we have to build across the income spectrum, all types of housing, but we've got to build more housing. And, I know I started by framing it as about economic growth, which I really believe, but I also think it's a quality of life issue in this state because, you talk to a lot of people, especially, once you get to middle age or older, what's one of the biggest quality of life issues for any family? It's, are you going to see your kids and grandkids on a regular basis, or are they going to be somewhere else? And right now we're increasingly becoming a state where it's hard for kids and grandkids to stay because there's no place to live.
That's right. That's that's an excellent point. And of course, there are a lot of properties. There's a lot of like we have Mansfield Training School or Southbury. There's Connecticut Valley, a hospital area. A lot of empty buildings there. A lot of places all over the state that the state could build. And I've often suggested that when I was one of the members of the housing committee. But I still do think the state has some authority to go in and take the state properties and start building and developing housing there. But we can't do it by ourselves in the state. We need to have developers that are interested, and we need to take control as a state of these areas where we have state properties that are just sitting there. Mm-hmm. Are you kidding me? Why are we letting it happen like that? That's crazy. But some of it has to do with the influence of some of the neighbors around those properties. And we need to just be able to say we need housing and we need people to be able to have a place to live. And some of these places are excellent places. They've got great grounds. You could do some great condominium complexes on them. And, it's time that we stepped up a little bit more. But I think you raise a really excellent point, and it's something that we are struggling with. We have more than 100,000. Right now, the state of Connecticut needs at least 100,000 more units.
Right.
100,000 more units.
Well, we need a concerted approach. We need people to come together. And, the problem is with 169 little fiefdoms all over the state, some of which are larger than others, like yours, and like New Haven, like Bridgeport, like New Britain. We need the people in the rest of the state to come together, and we all work together on this. This is not just a problem for Hartford or New Britain or East Hartford. It's a problem for the whole state. but apparently a lot of people don't recognize that, and it definitely requires leadership. And I hope, Luke, that when you go off to your next challenge, I hope you consider moving in that direction and trying to work statewide and get us all working together on some of these issues.
Well, I appreciate you saying it, Dennis. Right now, for the next 6 months, I'm just trying to not mess up and get as much done as I can, and then take a little break. We'll see.
Oh, I know that. Next 6 months, you got to work. You got to focus on finishing up in Hartford. You've done a wonderful job. You set a great example for us here in Windham Willimantic, because we try to follow your lead. We watch what you and Justin Elicker are doing, and you big city mayors all over the state, and you're showing us the way to some extent, and we need that.
Yes.
Well, we're in one of the things I always say is that we're in this little state that is the size of a lot of counties in this country, and we all need each other to be successful. Nobody can do well in this state unless we're all rooting for success everywhere. And I was thinking about this when I went out. I went out to the Boombox Parade this past, on Tuesday. It took me about 35 minutes to get there. When I go down to visit my in-laws in Houston, you don't think twice about driving 35 minutes, and it takes you halfway across Houston. You're still in one city.
Right.
And here, we think of ourselves like we're in these different worlds, but we're one little place, and we really do all hang together.
That's right. There are so many things we want to talk about with you, Luke, and we want to have you back on the show. Any last quick words?
No, I just really appreciate the chance to come on. I had a blast out there on Tuesday, and I look forward to coming out again soon. And, we're doing this one by phone, but I look forward to getting out there and being with you in the studio sometime. But I just wanted to thank you both for having me on, but also for the work that you've done that has made a difference for the whole state. And I'm really, really thankful for that and for our friendship.
Thank you, Luke, for taking the time for your busy schedule to be on. Let's talk about it. And folks, thanks for listening, and we will be back next week with another fabulous show.
Have a great week, everybody.